So again, let's back up here. Stations of the Cross, A Road to Remember, Part 2. We're going to be looking at the postmodern considerations as our primary thing today. And one of those places will be the St. Basil Chapel at University of St. Thomas. Last week in the first class, we noted 4 things about the Stations of the Cross tradition: that the cross became venerated by Christians early on. Relics became increasingly part of the Christian experience. The meditative practices became very important because of the dissemination of meditative text in the vernacular for a lot of people. So it kind of came out of the monasteries and the nunneries. And finally, the desire to bring a pilgrimage experience close to home. We noted that the earliest experiences or earliest stations were outdoors along processional pathways leading to cemeteries. Last week we looked at the Adam Kraft example from Nuremberg. It is a notable example. Early stations, as I mentioned, were privately funded. And the Catholic Church did not officially sanction the Stations of the Cross until the late 17th century, when the official 14 stations were established, and they could be depicted within the churches. And here we have the 14 stations that were established and that could be depicted in the churches. Now, some of these were extra biblical, and we noted these, that the falls were all actually extra biblical, including Jesus meeting his mother and Veronica wiping the face of Jesus. I would note one thing about that 6th station. There was a story about a woman of Jerusalem who's mentioned in the apocryphal Gospel of Nicodemus as being the woman that touched the garment of Jesus and was healed. So when we get further forward into the 11th century, that tradition of a woman named Veronica that wiped Jesus' face and his image became imprinted on it became solidified, and then it was popularized in the meditations on the life of Christ that we read last week. Again, for those that have been in St. Peter's, opposite the big statue of St. Helena, which we looked at last week, it's something that is kind of curious, but you can see where St. Helena is here. And here's the Baldacchino there at 3435. Can you see the my little marker there? Right to the left of it, here is Veronica. Everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
I think this is really important to note because, of course, we highlighted this in the first lecture about the importance and centrality of Helena as the mother of Constantine and her carrying the cross. And just straight across the way, this tradition of Veronica, and you can see right here where I'm circling, here is the veil, and you should be able to see this image of Jesus on that veil. So, you know, if you've been to St. Peter's, which I'm sure many of you have, you might not have really noticed this.
No, I didn't notice it. It says Veronica down there.
Righty. Now, in Catholic churches today, one often sees the Stations of the Cross along the walls. And here are a few typical ways that you might see them. You might see them as bronzes here on the left, or as sculptures hung on the wall, the next one. Sometimes you'll see them very elaborately framed. And this is a bas-relief here. And of course, paintings in this lower right-hand corner. Now, today we're going to start with the St. Basil Chapel at the University of Houston, or University of St. Thomas, rather, in Houston. And this is a place that Cindy and I have been afforded the opportunity to visit on multiple occasions while living in the Houston area. Now this is the back side of the chapel, what you're looking at right here. And so that cross image that I had early on, that picture that was taken that had the dark wall, that was from the inside, okay, of this. And one typically, though, approaches this chapel from the front. And this is what it looks like from the front. It's one of the most amazing architectural achievements. Philip Johnson was the architect of this, came out of retirement to do that. It's in the shape of a cube. So if you follow this line across here, if you can follow and it goes all the way across to here, and then all the way down to this corner and across and back. And we looked at the back side of this. And so it's in the shape of a 50-foot cube. And then it has this big black granite plane that intersects right through the middle of it. And then, of course, the golden dome on top. The dome reflects very brightly to the viewer from all directions. And it can be seen from the downtown business district of Houston to the immediate north. And this is, how stunning that can be. So these buildings down here are part of the South Houston downtown area. Now, I want to go back to that front entrance, though. It has a very unusual doorway. Does this entrance make you think of anything?
A curtain.
Curtain, yes.
Or a tent flap.
Exactly. It's a tent flap. I mean, this is meant to simulate the early Hebrew tabernacles that were a portable tent of meeting. I mean, I've not really ever seen anything quite like this architecturally, but it is really something. I mean, the Johnson conception here is just wholly unique. So what happens is after you walk through the tent flap, you're in this narthex. Okay, so this gray wall here, that is that wall that you see from outside that's cutting through. Okay, and so we're looking inside there, but you can't help when you walk in. The next thing that happened is that you must look up, and that is the feeling of verticality that you get inside the cube, but within the narthex before you walk into the chapel. Is everybody sensing this feel here?
Oh, yeah.
So inside the chapel, which seats about 225 people, one continues to experience that verticality. And you can see that there's natural light coming that highlights obviously through the cross on the left. There is also light that comes from this oculus right at the center of the central altar area. And then there is this other light that comes in at the top here. So it's a tremendous amount of natural light. And what we're going to focus on today, and I should mention that way over here in this right corner, there's a little statue. I should have had a picture of this, but it is a statue of Mary and Jesus that is done by the same David Cargill stations that we're going to look at. But it's just a gorgeous piece of artwork that I just really love. Anyway, but let's look at this wall. So if you were to walk in there during the day, this is what you would see on that south, or on that, let's see, this is actually the west wall, I believe. Yeah. Anyway, it's the left wall. And what we see is the David Cargill Stations of the Cross. David Cargill is a Southeast Texas sculptor from the Beaumont area, and he's very, very well noted in that area. And what's interesting, though, is as one approaches the wall, and let's see, we come at it from this angle here, uh, there, the depictions of the stations begin to play tricks on your mind. And sometimes they appear to be a bas relief coming out of the wall. So these right here, these, can you see how that looks like they're coming out of the wall here?
Yes.
But down here on this end, the further away, it's like, well, are they or are they not? It's not clear. Well, this is actually a sunken relief. The whole thing is a sunken relief. And so the images that we see emerge from this wall in a near holographic effect as you walk by them. And they also change as the light in the room changes. So that changes the effect as well. So Cindy had ordered this mask on Amazon, and we had it in class, and it was on March the 9th in the first class. And we were going to pass it around, but we were already in that, oops, the COVID, don't touch anything, you know, so we didn't do that. But I want to show you a little clip, and this is what this thing looks like. Just watch this. So now we're about to get the sunken relief. Like, whoa, what just happened? What we just observed right there is, in fact, the effect that David Cargill created in this wall. It's just absolutely crazy. And it causes you sometimes to want to reach out and touch it. And I will point out a time that is rather significant spiritually in a moment. So going back to the wall here, I want to go to one other view of this right here. I would like for you to give me some first impressions at this depiction. What are the things that catch your eye, particularly compared to what you may typically see of the Stations of the Cross?
Doesn't look like a cross.
Folks, you'll have to unmute yourselves in order to speak, most of
You
you.
have to unmute us, dear.
The cross is a single pillar of wood, not the typical cross.
Correct. What else?
Also, I really had to concentrate to separate the 14 different things. They merge a little bit.
Yes, they do merge, and actually there's 15 here.
Oh, okay.
Can't see them.
Yeah, and some of them are merged. One of the things that strikes me about this is usually whenever you encounter Stations of the Cross, they are all in a straight line along a wall or two. What we see here is a meandering line that comes out and goes back and forth and comes back down and around. It's a pathway.
It's a triptych.
Yeah, I mean, there's this notion whenever if you are a parishioner that comes to consider these images, you are asked to walk that pathway. And it's a meandering pathway. It's not a straight line. I think that's a very interesting theological statement, actually, that's being made through this. So anyway,
Can I ask Stuart? Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Stuart, how do you see the triptych? Where do you see a triptych?
I see the flow. It's a, as Mark said, it's kind of a pathway, and it invites you into this flowing, meandering.
Yeah.
You know, I guess that was my main reaction to it. Or thinking about
well, there is 3 curves. There's this one, there's this one, and there's this one. In that mode, I mean, I don't know if you're thinking about it like that.
One other thing I'd say my response to it is that that it really concentrates on him, on Jesus.
Yes.
Many of the stations have larger groups of people. There's more action going on. This is like his journey.
Yes. This is it is incredibly singular in that way. And I tried to, I don't know what the appropriate complete word for description of this. This is definitely a postmodern development. And I think that one of the things in the postmodern development is there's an abstraction here, and but yet in this particular case, it's I don't know, it's partly abstract, but then it's also representational at the same time. Okay.
I almost had the sense when we were kids, we made those little cartoon moving images books, or you could get them in
looks-
cereal or whatever, and it would
Yes.
look like a movie if you, I had the sense that you could do that with
Yes.
this, that you could thumb through it and it would show like a movie.
So what we're going to do for this one, I want to look at each individual station. So let's do that. These are the first two. And
Mark,
yes,
before you go on, I had a question.
yes,
Way back, you mentioned these 14 stages and that some were extra biblical.
yes.
My question is, on those, are they in the Catholic Bible but not in the Protestant Bible, or are they extra biblical from the Catholic Bible?
I think it may be a combination. I can't answer definitively for you about that, but I know that like the Veronica thing in the book of Nicodemus, that's not in the Catholic Bible. So that whole development of that tradition is outside of that as well.
Yeah.
And I cannot tell you, I don't think that the falls actually were part of the Catholic Bible, quite frankly. I think that all of that is before. So I think all of these would even be extra to that.
Okay.
But somebody could tell me that I'm wrong about that. But
I think I knew about Veronica because of the Catholic.
so when we start here, and I think that the observation about that only Jesus is in this first one here, I think this is really important. You know, we looked last year at when we were doing the last week of Jesus. We looked at Nikolai Gay's piece, the Russian, and his piece about Jesus with Pilate was pretty unique because it was just him and just Pilate. There were no other people, and it was a very, very moving piece, very meditative piece. We see that here as well, except we don't even have Pilate. We have Jesus. We can see a little bit of an impression of face. He already has the crown of thorns. His hands are bound. When we move to the second, we see Jesus carrying his cross in station number 2. We move forward. Station number 3 is the first fall.
Simon, I think that's.
And again, particularly when you look at these images here, they jump out. They completely belie the fact that it's sunken relief. And then the 4th station where he meets his mother.
Oh, that's his mother.
You might recall that in the Adam Kraft pieces, the first station in Adam Kraft was him meeting his mother as he was falling. Here we find Simon helping on the left. It's interesting that, again, Simon is turned away from us. We don't see his face. And to the right, here's Veronica. And we almost see a little bit of face. And she is seen, you can see right here that she is lifting that veil either having just wiped Jesus' face or about to wipe Jesus' face to remove the blood and sweat from his face. And this one is very interesting here, because going back to the observation that some of these are merged together. So we have the second fall in the foreground, if you will, and then right behind it, immediately afterwards, Jesus meets the women of Jerusalem. So it's interesting to see how these two images are interlocked. And if we remember what Jesus told the women, what did he tell them?
Weep for yourselves.
Right, weep for yourselves. Don't weep for me. Weep for yourselves, weep for your children. And I think that Cargill has put these together because they would have just observed this fall. And so he has recovered from this fall, and then he's saying to them, weep for yourselves. Here's the third fall on the left. This one is a very, very contorted image. I have thought about this one a lot in regards to my own body. It is painful. And then Jesus stripped and flogged on the right. Whenever I look at this one, is the one where, although this is not the nails in the hand, this is the one that causes me, whenever I look at it, I want to reach out like Thomas. I want to touch. Nailed in the lower left, and then in the upper right, again grouped very closely together, dying on the cross.
Today Marge and I were singing some things and remembering, and I know, Mark, that you like to sing, there's many large Easter choral works where when it comes to this scene of the nailing of the nails,
Mm-hmm.
the music actually has a hammering effect where the nails are driven in. And
Absolutely.
it's really powerful like this. Even this.
Yes. Yes.
The writhing here seems to me with the pounding.
Mm.
There's a body reaction to it.
Yes.
Not just prone flat.
Mm-hmm. Again, as you look at these, I think this is these are fantastic photographs that Mary McNulty has allowed me to use, because you absolutely see how it comes out on the wall too. It's just,
Mark, we lost you for a moment.
I know for some reason my Bluetooth speaker is cutting in and out. And then 13 and 14,
Oh,
the removal, and just the single wrapped body for entombment. And I put these images, there are two different pictures, I put them together in the position that you would find them on the wall.
yeah.
So, and finally, the 15th station. And why is that there?
Resurrection.
Are we?
Yeah.
Resurrection.
Yeah, it is this hope.
Wow. It just,
So what
the
are your thoughts about-
transformation is
Oh,
so remarkable. Oh, look at that.
I know. Hang on. I want to get thoughts about Cargill stations. What do you think of them?
I just,
Can I make a kind of I just want to make an observation on the brilliance of the relief design. When you look at, if you just put one up, can you just put up one of the close-ups for a moment?
Yep.
Mark, you see what happens here is that he understands the light in that chapel. And when you're looking at these images, they become almost mystified by the fact that you know the light is on the right, but as you're looking at the image, it's as though it is a non-relief image, image in the foreground, with
Yes.
the light to the left.
Yes.
And so it adds this kind of measure of mystery or effervescence to the viewing of the images. It's really
There-
brilliant.
That is absolutely the way this works when you're there.
And
I've talked about whenever we were going through this, I said, road trip time, I need to get back to Houston and see some people, but we can.
I need to go to Houston.
But because there's so many incredible Houston Fine Arts Museum is fantastic as well. But anyway, let's.
That's where the money is.
I would make note that Cargill is 90 years old right now this year. He at least on March the 9th or 8th, a retrospective of all of his work was being exhibited in Beaumont. And I don't know what's happening now with the COVID, but there is a wonderful, wonderful article online about him in Texas Monthly, which is a magazine that Cindy and I used to enjoy when we lived in Texas. But if you were to search for David Cargill in Texas Monthly, it's a beautiful, beautiful article about his work. Anyway, so before we move to the next thing, I wanted to make note about something about the postmodern era. After World War II, artists really began to seek new ways to express themselves, and they were very affected by the despair, I think, that was associated with the calamity of World War II. So this postmodern movement saw the development of less concrete representations to communicate. So in fact, Cargill's is less concrete in its representations. But many artists wanted to leave behind a lot of the influences of the European art constrictions. Of course, we examined some of those postmodern works of art with Gerhard Richter during Advent. But although really Americans were leaders in this movement. And that's what leads us to the next stations of the cross that I want to examine. And it's by the American artist Ellsworth Kelly. Ellsworth Kelly was born in 1923, and Kelly explored what I would call the in-between space of the optical world that lies in the middle of painting, relief, and sculpture. Now, the day that we had this class, Chris in her sermon was talking about liminal spaces. And I thought, that's the word actually I was looking for. The in-between spaces, the liminal spaces. And so I want to show you a non-station work of his, called White Curves. And to demonstrate what this amazing thing that he has done between painting, relief, and sculpture. This piece, it's about 20 foot tall, and it stands outside the Böhler Museum in Basel, Switzerland. And what's interesting about this, you can see right here that here, do you see this edge? And because of the materials that he's got, it's reflecting on this one side, trees that are to our right. But then you look at this edge right here, and it's not clear. Is it is it a flat surface, or is it coming out, or what is it doing? So I'm going to show you what happens depending on the angle of view, how strikingly changed this can be.
Oh, wow.
This is all the same sculpture. We're getting a little bit of digital error here because this is a straight line on these edges. So just be aware that these curves are perfectly, they don't have a ridge like that. But you can see here that there's two things happening right here. You see how this is coming out on the right-hand side here. So Kelly was a person that was not necessarily, I don't know that he was a Christian, but his very last works in the state was the Stations of the Cross, and it was just completed last year, well, 2018. And it is on the University of Texas campus in Austin, and is called the Austin Chapel. It opened in February of 2018. It had been designed by Kelly over a 30-year period, and it was actually finished after his death because he died in December 2015. And so I want to, but this is an amazing abstraction that we're going to see. And again, keep in mind that he's working in this optical world between painting, relief, and sculpture. When we go inside, you'll see this. But let's look at it from the outside. Here's a different angle. You can see some of the University of Texas buildings in the background there. You can see that we have stained glass on squares here. We have it in a different shape on there. We go back to the other side, we realize that, oh, this is a very interesting little dome in the back. And if you look at a scale model of it, you can see, if you top off, how over here on this other side, you have a third set of different stained glass windows. And then you have some kind of representation, an obelisk in place of the cross. So this is very interesting. And we're going to go inside. If you stand right in front of the obelisk and you look backward toward the front door, this is the view that you get. You will notice along the left and right hand side the Stations of the Cross from Ellsworth Kelly. We start 1, 2, 3 on this right, and this is 12, 13, and 14 over here. Now at this point you're going, wow, this is really different. If we look at the west transept with some people in it, you get a little bit of the scale of it, and you see the starburst glass in that window. If you look then straight on at the chapel, you see the obelisk.
Oh, cool.
And you also see how the light is coming in and hitting it. And finally, if we look toward the east transept, these blown glass square pieces there, and of course the stations along the side there. Now if we go back to the front, you can see that these are rather amazing blown stained glass whenever you look at them up close. And the light, here is the light coming in on the 13th and 14th stations. So what's happening here is continually changing. Just like his work, white curves, depending on the angle you looked at it at, it's very different in how it impacts you. He has set this thing in such a way that this is a very moving, living sort of a thing, as opposed to whenever we maybe go into a museum to look at a painting that is very controlled lighting. This is not that. He is using all the elements here. I have not been to this chapel, but I'm going to be going to it because it's very recent. Again, back to the field trip to Texas. So I read an article written by a Catholic person that decided to try to walk these stations. And after doing so, he stated that it was the most moving experience of the Stations of the Cross that he had ever had. And without being in the space and without doing Our Fathers and Hail Marys, I want us to walk through this, through Kelly's 14 very abstract expressions of the stations. And I am going to read scriptures that relate to each of these. It's actually part of a brochure that has been prepared, and I think it actually comes out of, I'm trying to remember, oh, I can't remember who it was. I should have that tip of my tongue. But anyway, we're going to start, and this will go in 3s and 2s. 1. What I was born for, what I came into the world for, is to bear witness to the truth. Whoever belongs to the truth listens to my voice. Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" That's from John 18. 2. So Jesus went out carrying his own cross to the place named after a skull. Its Hebrew name is Golgotha, from John 19. And from Matthew 16, if anyone has a mind to come my way, let them renounce self and take up his cross and follow me. 3. This would be the first fall. My own wrongdoing towers high above me, hangs on me like a heavy burden. My wounds fester and rankle with my own folly to blame. Beaten down, bowed to the earth, I go mourning all day long. My whole frame afire, my whole body diseased. So spent, so crushed, I groan aloud in the weariness of my heart. Psalms 37. Jesus meets his mother. And Jesus, seeing his mother there, and the disciple too, whom he loved, standing by, said to his mother, "Woman, this is your son." That's John 19:26. Simon helps. As for his cross, they forced a passerby who was coming in from the country to carry it, one Simon of Cyrene. Number 6 is Veronica. From John, whoever has seen me has seen the Father. And from Matthew 25, believe me, when you did it to one of the least of my brethren here, you did it to me. The second fall. Whoever has seen me, whoever has seen me has seen the Father. Believe me, when you did it to one of the least of my brethren, here you did it to me. Seven. Here is one despised, left out of all human reckoning, bowed with misery, and no stranger to weakness. How should we recognize that face? How should we take any account of him, a man so despised, our weakness? And it was he who carried the weight of it, our miseries, and it was he who bore them. meeting the women, "It is not for me that you should weep, daughters of Jerusalem. You should weep for yourselves and your children." Nine. It is not as if our high priest was incapable of feeling for us in our humiliation. He has been through every trial, fashioned as we are, only sinless.
Hmm.
I'm sorry. Something happened here. I'm sorry.
This one.
There we go.
9.
The one on the left is 9. Or excuse me, no, that's the previous 9. This one on the left now is 10. If a man would take away your cloak, do not grudge him your coat along with it. "11. Jesus was meanwhile saying, 'Father, forgive them. They do not know what it is they are doing.'"
That's another square.
That's being nailed and died.
So that should have been.
12.
Not the
And at
one
the
that-
ninth hour, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Then Jesus gave a loud cry and yielded up his spirit. 13. They took Jesus' body then and wrapped it in winding clothes with the spices. This is the greatest love that a man can show, that he should lay down his life for his friends. From John 15. And finally, Joseph took possession of the body and wrapped it in a clean winding sheet. Then he buried it in a new grave, which he had fashioned for himself out of the rock, and he left it there, rolling a great stone against the grave door. From Matthew 27. Responses to this? My apologies that the thing skipped on me one.
Chapter.
Were you able to feel that?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
One of the thoughts I had, especially in the Veronica one, which I think is in the middle,
Yes.
and because we're doing with white and black, there's a
Yes.
real sense of the yin and yang and the balance of yin and yang, and the body and the spirit, or the masculine and the feminine. I mean, and that each of the stages has a different ratio, balance, or twist, if you want to say,
Yes,
on the balance of the light and the dark.
absolutely.
It made me think of yin and yang.
Mm-hmm.
It would really be something to sit in this space all day long as the light changes and to see what happens.
Yes, it would be amazing.
It would be amazing.
Okay, we're having such fun here.
I want to know it. This picture is so crappy.
That's a good one. The what? Solomon? Solomon Guggenheim.
Mark, did we lose your audio? I think we lost your audio for a minute. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm really looking forward to that new speaker thing set up. Okay, so Newman is a fascinating character. He was born in 1904 in New York, but he was the son of Jewish immigrants from Poland, and his former hometowns Jewish population would have been wiped out by one of the Nazis' pogroms. Uh, but his artistic career developed very dramatically after World War II. He was very good friends with Mark Rothko and Jackson Pollock and Adolf Gottlieb and Clifford Still from the museum here in Denver, which if you haven't been to this Clifford Still Museum here, it's truly stunning, and it's always worth a visit more than once. And we were there several weeks ago and just continue to enjoy it. Newman is a minimalist, and he is most known for his zips or vertical lines. And I compare his zips to what you see in the Still Museum as Still's lifelines. Okay, how many have been to the Still Museum downtown, right next to Denver Art Museum?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So eventually what happens is it Still has develops these lifelines, these vertical lines, and they're so fascinating. And they have a corollary to what we're going to see here in a moment with Newman. So I think perhaps the most famous of Newman's works is his Stations of the Cross, and it's currently at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. The stations took 7 years to complete between 1958 and 1965, and of course went initially on exhibit here at the Guggenheim. And if you've been in the Guggenheim, it's a fascinating place to be in because you start at the bottom and you work your way up to the top in this circular path. I've got this wonderful little coffee cup from there that is my favorite. But inside, this is what you see, and so you're walking up and up and up. And one of the interesting things about this spiraling corridor is that whenever the 14 stations of Newman were put in here, you couldn't see the end from the beginning, okay? And the Newman stations are not representational at all. The zips of the 14 stations change, exhibiting different nuances and complexities. Newman used only black and white paint, but unlike Kelly, he mixed them, as you will see. And when this was originally exhibited, this was a very, very new way to approach the stations. And he had one idea, again, in his mind, and it was simply this. It was Christ's cry from the cross. Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. My God, why hast thou forsaken me? So he wasn't trying to represent each of the stations. He was simply responding to this one emotion. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through each of these stations. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to rotate through them about every 15 seconds, just so that you can experience each one of them and how it changes. And then after we get to the end, we'll talk about it. Okay? And this is actually the 15th station. It's called B2. In which he introduces a color. Thoughts? So what do y'all think about that?
You'll have
Everybody's,
to unmute yourself.
everybody's muted right now for some reason.
So you'll have to unmute yourselves to speak.
Yeah.
We only saw the last few because our Zoom went out, but
Oh, no.
we'll catch it on YouTube. But
Okay.
what we saw motion, you know, and the difference in the colors that you pointed out.
Yeah. What's interesting to me is, you know, this is, as we talked about, this is non-representational, and you can't say, oh, here's Jesus falling, or here's him meeting the women. None of that. But there is this vertical stretching. It's this cry, this attempt it's this cry of humanity.
Well, and the way you have it melting into each other,
Yes.
you almost get a sense of dialogue. Like most of the time, there's like two different. There's a stripe on the left, and there's
Yes.
one, you know, not all the way to the right, but somewhat to the right.
Right. So let me go back to a couple of those.
And of course, the title is, you know, "Why Have You Forsaken Me?" which is a dialogue.
Right.
What that means. Then I said that too.
And some of these like this one, it's very, very subtle on the screen. It's almost imperceptible. Do you see the very light line here?
Oh, I didn't
The
even.
white in this one right here. Can you see that? And then the big one over here to the left.
I like Cindy's comment about dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if some of the faint lines and some of the blurring
Yes.
are like attempts to answer or respond.
Yes. There's one of them I'm working back to here. One of the things that happens is sometimes you get a very straight line that seems like everything is very clear, like this one. But then sometimes you get something that is more interrupted, and even to the extent of you wonder how straight are these lines? I mean, like this one right here, it's so fascinating in regards to what's occurring right here.
And the red line at the end
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like you don't know you're going to get there and see that, but when you get that and it's such a change, it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's in some sense some kind of resolution or answer.
Yes.
Maybe not the answer you want, but it's some kind of end point.
Mm-hmm. I'm kind of going here through them a little quickly now. Just I've got a little bit of delay that I built into them, so get to the last one here. The B2, yeah.
Oh, that's gold.
Well,
Oh, I guess it's right.
the biggest influence on Trina's stations in our sanctuary were from Barnett Newman. And it's important to know that because I have had people that ask me, Mark, what is this? Mark, why aren't these numbered? Mark, I don't get it. And I think do one of two things. If you're really curious, and particularly if you spend some time in the sanctuary, Cindy, we put together a little virtual tour of these 14. It's out on YouTube. It takes about 10 minutes. As Cindy is reading Isaiah 53. And watch that, and both attend the service on Friday night at 7, virtually, because Chris has decided to make that part of that service. And I think that what you will find is that you will find some connections there. And whenever we look at Trina Station, I would remind it is non-representational, that the trees, they represent the cross, but they aren't the cross, but they represent a connection to the earth. And as I noted last week,
Uh-oh.
We lost you again.
Where are you?
Not even talking.
I think you-
sorry, I would remind that, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I noted last week that the trunk blend exactly with the wainscoting, but the black ones and the white ones, Cindy had noted that they blend with the windows above. And these were painted specifically for this space. And what we have is a melding of the transcendent and the mundane.
They were changed.
She
So I'll take
Three
this
times
off.
the size and would not fit.
He painted these for our sanctuary.
For our sanctuary, Trina did.
But they were from a former.
Marge would like to, both, we were there with her. We did the hanging with her. And
Oh, good.
I think it was really interesting, and Marge could explain a little bit about how it became that she did these for our church. And also, I think the issue of the stages is important because we asked her which one was which stage, and she said it didn't matter. So I think it's more like the I've been forsaken concept, where it's not
Exactly.
a story, but it's telling an emotional experience.
Exactly.
Because she actually picked where these would be, well, not just she, the group as a whole that was there picked where these would be, and we kept moving
Right.
them around in the church
Right.
until they made sense in the way they looked with the windows and the wainscoting and the light and a lot of other things. And if you haven't seen them, they're in the bright light. They have a very silver paint that reflects.
Yep.
Luminous.
It's luminous, and it's just
Mhm.
amazing at different times of day when the light comes through the window.
Right. There's like 40 coats of paint on all of these, and there are different things in them that one may not pick up on. But I think if you read the Isaiah text and if you go through the virtual tour of them, I have reordered them, and it is not to be station 1, 2, 3, or anything like that. It is to match the various emotions that are described to us in the suffering servant text of Isaiah 53. So for instance, this painting right here, these lights that are coming over this, off this is from an image, a picture of the vigil following the Virginia Tech massacre. And she superimposed that Virginia Tech vigil on this image. I think that you see one that looks like it's looking through blinds. And whenever I look at that, I think about how we find it very, very difficult to really look upon Jesus' suffering, what really happened. There are others of these that lift us up. There are others of these that contort us. Anyway, whenever you have an opportunity, walk through this for 10 minutes whenever your mind is right with that other video, and I think that you will come away from it with a greater appreciation for what this can mean and what it can bring to this Holy Week.
Chris, how long will we be able to hang them?
So they're actually scheduled to come down this week, but Trina, we need to follow up with her and see when she would like to come in and get them down. They're probably just going to stay here until we're able to be together again. The virtual tour of them really is very helpful. So, but it's not likely that by the time we get back that they'll be up very long after we're there. So the answer is I'm not sure how long we'll be there.
Mark, you had the Austin Chapel, the Ellsworth Kelly, and
Yes.
he was very careful in that chapel to put the interaction of the light coming through the windows interacting with the paintings.
Yep.
So it's all a unit, it all goes together, and the light is giving you this divine, transcendent aspect to it that enlivens these black and white paintings. And Trina, has used our space and designed for our space, so it's all a whole. It's really nice the way it's done. And someone mentioned the sparkly way. I think Dean mentioned the
Right.
reflective quality of the paint, so that wherever you stand and what time of day it is, there is an interaction of the space with the painting that is very intentional.
Right.
And it's like the Ellsworth Kelly in that sense of having the whole, the paintings, the individual paintings, and the context of the light and the space.
And quite frankly, I should say that in conversations with Trina that I've had, Ellsworth Kelly absolutely was an influence as well. Primarily Barnett Newman, but Ellsworth Kelly has absolutely had an influence on her artwork. Well, I guess that's it for today. This went a little longer than I anticipated. My apologies about that, but hopefully it's been something worthwhile to you.
Great.
And I will tell you that this Friday at 5 on Good Friday, we will do the last session. We'll try to make it. It will not go this long, but we are going to look at one set of 14 stations. I'm guessing that it'll probably be more like 40 minutes is the amount of time that we'll spend. But it will be very different than what you would expect as well. But yet it takes aspects of the postmodern and it merges it with the American experience. And the thing the first painting that we will look at will actually be from one of my favorites, Henry Ossawa Tanner. And it just gets better from there. So that'll be Friday at 5.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank
You're
you, Mark.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I thought I'd see who else was in here.